some way of sort of giving me a focus to create within. Makes me feel more creative and generally more effective at telling a story, which is really what it's all about. That's really the thing that is here, is like everything to me should tell a story. I have a sort of a bias that way. I believe we as human beings, we are stories. It's it's why you and I are friends and hanging out together. It's why people got together and created a vaccine. Why people got together and built buildings and won wars is stories, a shared history and context that enables us to work. And I think that's ultimately the basis of our humanity. Therefore, it's so important in music, because music should represent life.
This comes from a conversation that I had with jazz guitarist Bruce Forman a little while back. And I originally offered it as an exclusive for the subscribers on my Patreon channel, Guitar Tips Pro. I've decided to share the whole thing here on YouTube now publicly because I recently went back and rewatched this conversation and was struck by how much juicy goodness there is here. Lots of wisdom. Bruce Forman is arguably the greatest living bebop guitar player, and also just a really intelligent, thoughtful person, a really great artist, has a lot to say, a lot to share. So I know you're going to love this conversation. I want to get out of the way and let you get to it. Just a bit of housekeeping before I do. If you appreciate this channel, please be sure to like and subscribe. You can see there's a little red guitar pick there in the corner. That is the subscribe button for this channel. It's real easy to do. Also, get involved. If you're watching this video and you think, gosh, well, why didn't Adam ask Bruce Forman such and such? Leave a comment down below. What do you think that I should have asked him that I didn't ask him? Or if there's somebody else that you would like to see me have a conversation with in this format, that's what the comment section down below, that's what it's for. So get involved. Well, I had a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about. One is about Reunion, which is
cool. Yeah.
the new record. If people don't know, I don't know. Do you want to say what the concept of Reunion is?
Well, sure. It started many years ago. I was real tight with Barney Kessel. I got to play with him a bunch and loved his playing, of course, and got to know him. I mean, I was on the road with him. My bio's full of quotes about me from him. I mean, and when he got sick, I used to go down and visit him, and I'd play his guitar a little bit. And then after he passed away, I would still visit with his widow. We were really tight, and I would play the guitar partly because she wanted to hear it, but also because she wanted to make sure it wasn't falling apart just sitting in the case like that. Because me and her imagined its value at a far inflated thing than I think the world did. So so I was playing it, and I had this idea because the Poll Winners records, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and
Sure,
maybe
yeah.
your listeners are, they were basically back in the mid 50s when the West Coast jazz scene was the craze. Barney Kessel, Ray Brown, and Shelly Manne all won the Downbeat poll and the Esquire poll and the Playboy poll and the Metronome poll. And so Barney and Shelly were both on Contemporary Records. And so they just came up with this idea, varying reports on who actually came up with the idea, but to do a trio called the Poll Winners and make these records. Well, they did one and it was real successful. And of course they kept winning the polls. So they made them for another 4 years. Barney finally got knocked out of the top spot by some young guy. I think it was 62, a young guy named Wes Montgomery took over at that point. So, and these records are, besides being great records that I just love. I mean, I love them because they sound so good and the playing's so fresh, but also and the way they did it, they would just go in the studio and pick tunes and kind of arrange them on the spot and play them. It was, you can tell it was definitely not a, you know, a rehearsed band written out kind of thing. These guys were working in the studios all day long, you know.
Right.
And that's probably another reason why the West Coast, I never had thought about this now that we're talking about it, how the West Coast jazz thing became so hot. You know, of course, the world was ready for new stuff and everything. But all these guys were like, they were quite a bit more popular than typical jazz musicians because they were on TV. I mean, these, you know, like Ray Brown was on the Merv Griffin show or the Johnny Carson show or whatever, you know, I mean, it was like, and like Barney was in Perry Mason, and, you know, whenever there was a band playing in one of those TV shows of that time, these guys were on TV, and Shelly Manne was too.
Right.
And they were,
like Barry Galbraith wasn't on TV.
Right. So, I mean, you could see how that also helped propel the notoriety of the West Coast jazz scene is like TV and movies did.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about it contextually. I'd always kind of had a different idea about it, which I'm sure those ideas are correct too, but that I'm sure fueled it. Anyways, so these guys, you know, they're doing the Pink Panther during the day and stuff like that. And then they're, you know, or whatever was happening in 1957 and 58. And so they just go in and play, you know, this was like their playtime. And so I always dug the way those records felt so fresh and raw and alive. But the biggest deal is historically, to my knowledge, and I've really asked a lot of people, the guitar trio was not an established ensemble at that point. It was like the guitar was always with a piano and bass, or with vibes and bass, like in Red Norvo kind of bands or George Shearing kind of stuff.
Right.
Or in like George Barnes' case, there was a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar.
Mm-hmm.
But there were not really like the guitar bass drums, like the piano bass drums rhythm section yet in jazz or in any real style of music. So in so many ways, those records are hugely important historically. Because you can draw a direct thing like 5 years later, 1962, Sonny Rollins does the bridge with a rhythm section of guitar, bass, drums, which really changed the life for us. You know, I mean, imagine how different, particularly mine, but yours too, our lives would have been had there not been that happening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, and then like 63, Buddy Holly is a guitar trio.
Right.
You know, now obviously Leo Fender helped out a lot there, but he had upright bass. He didn't have electric bass. The electric bass had not been, you know, happening. So, you know, and then, you know, so you can see this, like, this is some hugely important historical music. Anyway, so I have just like a love of that and a love of Barney. And then, and I know this is a long story, but I'll try to make it short. And anyways, the guitar ended up going to auction, Barney's guitar. And what made his guitar so interesting is, unlike most guitar players who are like Imelda Marcos was with shoes, you know, and for those young people, Imelda Marcos was a famous wife of the president of the Philippines, who, when they found like thousands and thousands of designer shoes when she was either deposed or passed away. I'm not sure which. And so, but Barney played one guitar pretty much his whole career for the jazz side. This Gibson ES 350 with a Charlie Christian pickup in it. There's even a really cool YouTube called Barney Kessel Talks About His Guitar. It's about a minute long, and he goes into detail why he likes it and how he put it together, kind of. And when Phyllis, Barney's widow, decided to sell it, I was very well aware of the fact that I could never afford that. You know, it was just way beyond my price range. And of course, I wanted her to get as much money as she could.
Yeah.
So it went to auction, and I believe that our personal opinion of its value in the world was different, let's say. And, you know, and it went for considerably less than we thought it would. And which was kind of devastating for her, because I'm pretty sure after the auction fees and everything, I could have given her the amount of money that she ended up getting herself. But it went to a really nice guy who I became in touch with because she got to know him and gave me his number. And whenever he was in Colorado, whenever I'd go to Colorado, I'd let him know I was in town so he could come to the gigs and stuff. So fast forward to this last May, I'm driving to Santa Cruz. There's a club called Kumba Jazz Center. It's been there for 50 years. I've played it being from the Bay Area. I'm sure you know about it too, being from the Bay Area.
Yep.
It's an iconic, beautiful space. And I was doing a live stream there this past May. And like at some point, like halfway to through the drive, it was like Barney KESSEL was in the car with me. It was really strange. And Adam, I don't believe in this shit at all. I'm not one of those guys that kind of believes in the afterlife or supernatural or any of that shit.
Yeah.
I just don't, but here I am sitting in this car and I can't stop thinking about Barney. It was to the point where I could like smell his aftershave. And it wouldn't leave me. It was just like, he was just a passenger in the car. I kept thinking about the times we played together and all sorts of stuff and the guitar. And I got to Kumba and I realized, oh yeah, I played here with him like 35, 40 years ago. That's why, but even in the club, it was just like, he was there still. And I've played there 2 or 3 dozen times since then, never thought about it once, didn't even remember it really. And so I just got on my phone and I emailed the guy who had the guitar. I said, I'm having this flashback of Barney. Hope where I'm in a club we played in 35, 40 years ago. Hope you're getting along with the guitar. If you ever decide to sell it, please give me first crack at it. Went up and played a set. When I got back to my phone, he emailed me and he says, I don't believe you're contacting me now. I just said to my wife, it's time for me to sell this guitar. I don't want to have something happen to me and have her have to get rid of it. She doesn't know what it is and want the kids to have to deal with it. Said, if you'll give me what I paid for it, if you'll come get it, because I don't want to ship it, and if you'll give me a guitar lesson, you can have it.
Oh, wow.
So like a week or two later, I was in my car driving to Colorado because it was right during Memorial Day or so when there was the COVID thing was like loosening up and we could work gigs again, So like I booked a gig in Denver and a gig in Fort Collins and a gig in Salt Lake along the way. And I went back and got the guitar and I called John Clayton, who had Ray Brown's bass. And who was, he's Ray Brown's main protege. I mean, that is the guy. If you want to know about Ray Brown, you talk to John Clayton. And Jeff Hamilton was kind of Shelley's favored. Shelley picked Jeff to take over in the LA Four, which also became Ray Brown's trio too later. And Oscar Peter, all these bands, like Shelley was always throwing Jeff at those gigs. So he was like the favored boy for that style of music. Obviously Jim Keltner was real close to him too for more of the studio thing, he and Steve Schaefer too. So I called the guys, I said, and I knew where a set of Shelley's drums were from about that period. So I said, hey guys, why don't we revisit the Poll Winners, but instead of this playing their songs or copying their solos, we'll just get the instruments back together. And it's like kids playing their parents' instruments, basically. And we'll do it the same way, no rehearsal. We'll just go in, we'll talk through some tunes, we'll arrange them on the spot, and we'll record it. And that's the long story, of how Reunion happened.
That's great. That's great. Man, I have to say, I never checked out those records, even though I had other records that Barney KESSEL had played on and really liked him. But when I was sort of coming into jazz in my early 20s, I guess, really starting to get more serious about it, I saw those records and I thought the covers were kind of corny. They're on the cover with these big candy stripe poles. And of course I knew who Barney KESSEL was and I was aware of Ray Brown, maybe a little less aware of Shelley Mann back then. And I just thought, I don't think, this is the record for me, and then, maybe instead I think I got, George Benson cookbook or something
Right.
that's just like, oh, this looks cool, even though that record actually has kind of a corny cover too. Now that I think
It
about it,
does kind of, but
standing around with a
you
bunch of
didn't make a
stove.
bad choice. I mean, that record is amazing.
Yeah.
You got a good deal there.
Okay. But I kind of slept on the poll winners records for years. It really, to be really honest, it wasn't until I heard you were starting this project that I went back and I thought, wait a minute, these are serious records. I need to check these out.
Yeah.
And I started listening, and I also seem to remember you asking at some point, I don't remember if it was on Instagram or somewhere else, but that very question is like, can somebody name a guitar trio that predates this? So I didn't realize how progressive. I mean, not like progressive jazz, but just conceptually progressive those records were. Because when I was coming up, like when I moved to the Bay Area in '89, and again, that's around the time I was 23, and I was getting more serious about jazz. And already I could see guitar trios playing around town. When you played at Pearls with Vince Latiano, wasn't that usually a trio? You didn't have a
Yes,
piano
it
player,
was.
right?
Occasionally there'd be a featured guest on. We did Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Some Thursdays we had a featured guest. Yeah.
Right. So that was a thing. And I don't know if you remember John Heller, but he used to play, he had a trio gig at this little spot in Berkeley I used to go to. And point just being like, at the time I was coming up, I could see the guitar trio was already a thing. And by that time, I mean, this is many years after the Poll Winners records, but like John Scofield had made those early trio records with Steve Swallow, and Jim Hall had made trio records before that. And so it wasn't so much like, I don't know, I just missed in the history of it how big a step forward that was. And then when ally it with yeah, Buddy Holly and stuff, it's almost like those Poll Winner records are, for jazz and jazz guitar, they're kind of like the Beatles being on Ed Sullivan, or like that kind of shockwave, like, oh wait, we don't, like, the guitar can lead a trio with bass and drums. That's a
Right.
really, it didn't hit me how fresh an idea that was in 1957.
Right. And of course, I mean, the pickup, the electrification of the instrument had a huge thing to do with it. The guitar is just such a soft instrument acoustically
Hmm.
that there was no way it could have done that, even if there were guys like Eddie Lang or stuff who had the harmonic and melodic sophistication to handle that responsibility. The instrument was just not going to let them do it, until the pickup with Charlie Christian and, George Barnes. And but Barney was, a lot of people, because he's so fiery and he goes for it, a lot of people kind of think of him as sloppy or, primitive. And boy, you sleep on Barney Kessel, you're making a big mistake, because, he was really very sophisticated harmonically. If you listen to those other records he did that, that were more arranged, like the
Mm-hmm.
Carmen record or Barney Kessel Plays Standards or Let's Cook, you'll hear like amazing arrangement, and he actually did for the movies. He arranged music for movies and stuff.
Hmm.
So he was, very deep in the arranging, composing side, which enabled him to be a complete trio player.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's what, it's, you forget sometimes listening to those records that it's a trio, because it almost feels like the Basie band or something. The way,
Exactly.
there's, that's the effect. He can play with those effects in the way that, you know, yeah, I was curious to ask you like what you think Barney Kessel's contribution to jazz guitar, like what are those things?
Well, I mean, you hit it. I mean, Count Basie is a huge influence there.
Mm.
The idea of the block chord soloing, and and that he's also Art. You can hear Art Tatum in there. You can hear just really these and arrangements. And he was such a hard swinging guy, you know, and very melodic, motific. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he was not really a changes player,
Right.
as
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
much as a lot of the more modern guys after him were. Um, he just, yeah, he really, but mostly it's like, God, this raw fire in him, and I think that's why he kind of like me, because I'm sort of as you know, I'm kind of an energetic player.
Yes, that's
So I
true.
think he once told me, he took me on the road with him for a European tour, and he said we were sitting at a dinner, and he asked me, he says, "Do you wonder why I picked you?" And of course I'm going, yeah, I could think of like four other people he could have picked, five other people that would have been great choices. I mean, I knew he liked me, but these other people would have been great.
Hmm.
And he said, I like you because you play the way I play, but you don't play like me.
Oh,
And I
wow.
just took that to kind of mean, yeah, I'm coming out of Charlie Parker and Count Basie. I do a lot of that big bandy kind of block chord kind of stuff, and a lot more like intricate. I call it almost like Bud Powell-ish block chord or Red Garland kind
Yeah,
of stuff.
right.
Um, and I think I just got the stuff from the same place he did, but I came up with something a little different.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because while I was very influenced by him in certain ways, I never really transcribed him or studied him that hard. I mean, I've kind of generally avoided doing that with guitar players. I mean, I love George Benson and Wes Montgomery and Joe Pass and Barney and Jim Hall and Kenny Burrell. I mean, they're just Django. I love them all, but there's something about me that just doesn't really transcribe them, or I mean, when I'm finding myself grabbing stuff, it comes from like horns and pianos,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I think that's kind of made my playing a little different, because I have to filter the information before I can get it out of the guitar rather
Huh.
than just copy the information.
Yeah. Yeah, the way you play feels so steeped in jazz vocabulary, but not in guitar vocabulary.
Right, right.
Yeah. I mean, language is even more what I want to say than vocabulary. Yeah,
Yeah.
jazz language and jazz feeling, but not anything familiar to guitar players where it's like, oh yeah, that's that Grant Green thing or
Yeah,
whatever. It's,
right.
it's
And it
that's
was a
that.
name I forgot to mention in my list. Yes.
Yeah.
Someone who I love dearly.
Yeah. I did notice, and I just thought it was sweet that you did on reunion sneak in a couple of Barney isms. There's a Pink Panther quote in one of the arrangements. I can't remember what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. That was
And
more for Shelley even than Barney, of course, because Shelley was such an integral part of that. But yeah, I snuck that in.
and
They did. We
the
did
Cry Me a
Bernie's.
River quote,
Yeah. Oh
right?
yeah. Well, that I don't know about you, but I think that introduction to Cry Me a River is maybe the most famous thing he ever did, the most
Mm.
iconic thing
Hmm.
he ever did. I mean, it was
Sure.
on that record sold like 3 million records in 1958. And so uh that intro, if you go online, you could probably, yeah, I know you can find, I've seen Jeff Beck play it.
Oh wow.
And and so I really wanted to, and so I just took another tune and just made an arrangement basically. That 4 bar was like my theme
Hmm.
for the arrangement, and then I just came up with all these ways of using that inside of another song, rather than just go and play Cry Me a River, because I wanted to avoid any ability to copy what he'd done.
Right. Right. Man.
And then there's that song I wrote called Barney's Tune,
Uh huh.
which is of course based on the changes of Bernie's tune. And
Right.
that thing where Barney used to like to play really fast thirds in like kind of arpeggiated way, like going up the chord, and he'd kind of slide them back and forth, so
Yeah.
I wrote like a melody that had that in it.
Mm. 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 Well, a thing that I love about this record, besides it's a great record to just listen to, is that it's really clear what the story is, and that's something that I think that you are really good at, and that I wanted to ask you about. Like this record, I mean, you could always just go in a room with a rhythm section and make a trio record. I mean, that's, you could do that every day for the rest of your life and come up with new tunes and new ideas. but there's a real clear concept around this record about these instruments and about the history of that trio, um, and I love that. And I was thinking also about your Red Guitar show, which could just be, hey, I'm gonna play a set of guitar music at Catalina's or whatever. But you wrote a whole show which tells a story that's feels like a folk tale, but then tie it all together with the history of jazz guitar and your personal history. So there's a real frame around it. It's a and then even and I know you did some tours where you went along Route 66. So again, you could just like, oh, I'm going to play some shows in the desert, but like that's a real clear idea. And even your role at USC, you're the artist in residence, which is different than being the chair or the assistant chair or whatever. And so it just seems like you're always putting a frame or a story around things that you're doing, and nothing is just another record or just another gig.
Uh-huh.
I'm just wondering if that's something you're conscious of, and if it's something you've always done, or was there like a light bulb moment where you said, oh, things need frames, things need stories?
Well, God, that's really, a great way to ask that question. I've been very cognizant all the time. That's my, I mean, I even thought to myself, there were times where like, I used to play with Donald Bailey. Do you remember when he was in San Francisco?
Sure.
Like really the most creative guy maybe I've ever personally known. He's like Thelonious Monk level to me, unique, crazy, beautiful, his own way of looking at the world, yet it works.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And he used to kind of like always be on me to like do new things, do stuff. And like, it was like, I always say, we called him Duck, he'd say like, come on, Bruce, what are you bringing? It's like, Duck, I'm playing bebop with you, and I mean, like, that was kind of what I wanted to do. And I always took it like I'm not good enough, like in a weird way. I took it sort of as a criticism or something. And he kept trying to say, he says, no, he says, you're already playing bebop with us. You're young. You're the one that's supposed to like kick our butts and make us think of new ways to do this. And it kind of hurt because, I mean, basically I knew that I just like, I didn't want to play with a sound like Pat Metheny or John Scofield, and as much as I love their music, it didn't resonate with me. I even tried fusion for about 6 months once, just because it was the new thing and everybody was doing it. And it just felt false to me. None of it, I mean, like listening to, I just didn't like playing it. I didn't feel like I was telling a story that was real. And then I kind of look back at one point in my life. It's sort of like I gotta be me. I gotta be me. I gotta be me. That's like your 20s and 30s, right? And then around 40, you go, oh shit, I'm me. And so, and then I'd look back and I realized, my kind of thing is the frame. It's really like having the story to tell and then being creative within the context of the purpose of serving the story. And, I mean, I write novels. So obviously I'm very much attached to the story. I write poetry, so it's like, there's a point to things. And then that to me, and there's even a line in the Red Guitar Show where I say, it's when you're challenged that your creativity emerges. And like having a frame to me makes me more creative. That point, that reason to do this, and having a bigger idea to serve enables me to actually feel more creative than just sort of the stream of consciousness, letting it go where it'll go. And I guess, I'm guilty of, even like when I play a tune, I'll have that sort of, just on a gig, or I'm playing duo with a singer and I just got my 10th solo of the set, what I mean? Right. And no, I'm going to like maybe I'll just decide to feature open strings or harmonics, or I'm going to play quarterly, or I'm going to, play counterpoint on this, just an idea, or I'm not going to get hot, I'm just going to stay cool, some way of sort of giving me a focus to create within makes me feel more creative and generally more effective at telling a story, which is really what it's all about. That's really the thing that is here, is like everything to me should tell a story. I have a sort of a bias that way. I believe we as human beings, we are stories. It's it's why you and I are friends and hanging out together. It's why people got together and created a vaccine, why people got together and built buildings and won wars, is stories, a shared history and context that enables us to work, and I think that's ultimately the basis of our humanity. Therefore, it's so important in music, because music should represent life,
Yeah.
I'm not always successful, but I try.
Yeah. Well, I just, I see it sometimes teaching at schools, and I see young people, and they don't all get that. Some of them are just, how can I get a gig? How can I get another gig? And then it's real easy if you get good, hustling gigs, which not everyone even gets good at, but 10, 20 years could go by, and then, like you say, you all of a sudden you're 40, and then and the you that you could be is just somebody who's just hustling gigs all the time, but not thinking about it in a bigger way, not thinking about the story, not thinking about the humanity, but just kind of stringing from one gig to the next. So I see the other end of that spectrum, and that's, it's to me, it's something really striking about you and about your career.
It's a global, or like you macro and micro. You can really go anywhere with this concept. I mean, I have a real problem with just people, with people don't learn the song they're playing, and then they play on it, and they wonder like why it's lacking, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I mean, I want to stop them and say, look, if you've got a gig and I'm on the gig and I don't know the song, do you really want me improvising on it? I mean, is that smart? Is that even, I mean, it's okay. Just let me figure out the song. I'll play along, and I mean, you take care of business, and eventually I'll know the song, and then great, let me play, I mean, that was the way the stories were told, because until we change the music and we're not playing songs, we have to treat the song as the most important thing. Or we're lost. And it's like, that's the story. Back to the story. That is the story we're telling. Why do we play that song instead of another song? It's a story.
Right.
Maybe we don't want to tell the exact story that the lyrics had, in the case of, for instance, All of You, Miles Davis, one of my favorite songs ever recorded on my Funny Valentine record. The treatment of that song has nothing to do with what Cole Porter wrote that song to do in the show Silk Stockings. That was written to be a complete joke, flirtatious, seduction, comical seduction song. Right. It wasn't about intensity and, and all these textures and, burning and, playing a bunch of heavy shit, It was really like, I mean, one of the lines is the east, west, the north, and the south of you.
Right.
I mean, come on, I don't know if that would even be legal today. and yet, like, what Miles did was brilliant in the band, I mean, don't get me wrong. And like I say, that's one of my all-time favorite recordings ever. But the story they created from that, they knew that song, and the story they created within the context of that song was very much their story.
Yeah. Yeah. it comes across more. There's just so much more intensity. It's more like obsession, or this just real smoldering intensity. It's not played for laughs or
Right.
yeah.
And the sound of that chord, it wasn't the first time he used that sound, in a song. Um, but that dissonance in the song, I mean, it's kind of weird that he used that for the purpose that Cole Porter did use it for, in a flirtatious, joking thing,
Yeah.
because it's not really a sound of that you expect with kind of like, a Christmas Carol, or
Right.
like a my Bye Bye Blackbird or something. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
It's really
Right.
got some darkness to that sound, and yet he masterfully worked it another way. But Miles' way of playing it almost suits the harmony better.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. I hear that.
But that's like I say, the choice was made. We're telling this story with this song, and then being the leader of a group, that's your responsibility to set the tone so that everybody around you can create, to the utmost of their ability. Because if it becomes formless, then you have it's just like a light bulb. The light bulb needs the cover so that the energy can build up and create light. Otherwise, the
Hmm.
energy just dissipates into the air.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. What an image. Uh, I wanted to ask you about one other thing, which is to do with solo guitar playing.
Uh-huh.
Um, which for me, most of my experience of you playing solo was in the context of the Red Guitar show
Uh-huh.
when I saw you in Long Beach. Um, but if the kind of big things driving your musical concept is Count Basie and Charlie Parker, how does, when it's just you on the bandstand, how do you channel those things, or do you channel other things?
Well, I don't see, I would pay big money to hear Charlie Parker solo. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
And I also, do have paid, and luckily I've played with Count Basie's band,
Mm.
so that to me, I think that those things can be channeled again creatively. It's a beautiful challenge, but when you say, okay, I'm going for this right now and I'm going to make this the thing, um, it's it's a challenge in and of itself. But the creative process of filtering that desire to create that thing through yourself and your instrument to the world is where the fun music and the important innovation happens. um you know Adam, it's really funny. I never thought of myself as a solo player. I still really don't. I've always been kind of a band guy. I love to comp, and I
Hmm.
love interaction with other players. So, but as of course I would do solos, like introductions before songs and stuff, and play duo with singers. So I mean, you're playing solo half the time there.
Right.
And I always liked it. And so and then the Red Guitar came along, and it was that kind of became my thing for a while. It's what I really wanted to do. Like, I was on off Broadway. My whole hope was one day to kind of get it on Broadway or something.
Mm.
Of course, COVID came along, and it was going that direction. I really feel. I mean, I was doing multiple shows a month all over the world, and then COVID came, and goodbye. Sort of killed that. But
Mm.
and it's not that I'm not going to revive it or whatever, but it did sort of put me in this, wow, I'm by myself, you know, and like I've always been a huge Art Tatum fan. And I've always tried to channel that onto the guitar. And of course, being in a solo space, of course, first of all, it's ridiculous to try, because
Right.
he's like five guitar players,
Right.
right?
Right.
But just to really embrace again the way I like transcribe, is like, whereas other people kind of write the exact thing down and then play it. I'm like, well, it feels like this. It sounds like this. He's using these basic techniques, or she's using these basic techniques. I'm just going to kind of do that and take my own vocabulary and put it in there and see if I can achieve the same sort of effect. Like with Art Tatum, a lot of it's like, there's always this implied time, but he's rarely playing it. And like, there's always these false modulations. You think he's modulating, he'll use a deceptive cadence or a target point, and then he'll cover it with you think it's going to a new key, but it's not, or something.
Right.
Like that's a real common thing. And he loves these cascading lines, particularly descending cascading lines.
Yeah.
And so like, okay, I'm going to kind of play with that kind of implied time in that vibe. And I'm going to kind of use these false modulations. And I'm going to do a lot of like, just like throwouts, not really metrically timed lines that are like 8th notes or 16th notes, sort of like cascades. And that's where it started, and now there's a lot of like, he likes a lot of, chromatic bass motion too. Okay, I'm going to start throwing that in, you know what I mean? And like, I kind of grab it in a general sense, which I think the older guys always did, because with records, transcribing was way harder than now, when you can like, use like slow downers and sound scrubs where you can grab like a 2-second thing and hear it 100 times. Like, you could never do that with a record and a stylus,
Right.
So I think guys, like, I really think Oscar Peterson sometimes thinks he's playing like Art Tatum. But he doesn't. I mean, he doesn't, he's his version of that, which is completely brilliant and different,
Right.
But I can hear like, oh yeah, he's kind of going there, but it's just so much more, his chops are so much more classically trained, and, and he's got so much more blues and gospel in his playing that it just sort of ends up sounding like Oscar Peterson,
Right.
And I think, so anyways, back to the solo thing, is like, I've just kind of always, I figured, and then COVID happened and I'm by myself, and one thing I'm really stickler about is like, in your practice time, you need to play a lot. It's just not practice. I think that's a problem I think a lot of my students have. It's like, if your goal is to play, you need to play. And when you're learning stuff, you need to be playing it. You don't need to be learning it in that, like, get it down and then go to the gig, because it ain't going to work. It's only going to work when you've actually done the integration of the idea into your sound, into the time feel, into like how it naturally arrives and goes and turns into something else. You know what I mean? Of course, you're playing along, you come up with an idea. The beautiful thing about practice is you can stop and hit the pause button and kind of work it out, and then kind of put it back in and, and run it, that's like brilliant, And so I kind of just embraced the pandemic. It was really weird for me, because I realized how much of my energy, and I'm sure you've more so than me, even this might be true, is so much of my personal music time was like practicing for the gig.
Right.
Like I was playing with a band and they were really into this music, and it wasn't really like my best thing, I wasn't real sure about it. So I had to really like kind of make sure I had a record date coming up, and I like to know the music, even though I can read it kind of, to me, reading is not a good idea when I want to really pay attention to what's going on around me. So, when I got to the pandemic and I had no more gigs and no more record dates and no more people to compete with, like, if you came to LA and you needed a jazz guitar player, there's about 4 or 5 of us that you would call. And so I had to kind of stay up even with those guys. If the new thing was playing in 7, well, then I better be able to play in 7 if somebody comes to town. Or if the new things is some like Peruvian beat, that everybody's playing, then I had to, practice that to get it into my playing.
Right.
And then bang, the pandemic happens, and like there's no more record dates. There's nobody left to compete with because there are no gigs. It's like no more bands to join. So it's like all of a sudden it's me and my guitar, and what do I want to play? Really? I mean, I didn't even have to ask myself that question, because basically once I started playing, it was pretty damn obvious what I liked. And it's something that I never stopped to even, it's like water finding its true place, when you pour it on, go to that spot that it's got to go. It's like just letting it go there was really big for me. And of course, the red guitar did sort of give me the impetus to get out solo, just get on the stage, nobody but me. And of course, my ability, I like to tell stories, so that was really cool. I mean, I incorporated that into my solo guitar show. I like comedy, so I do comedy. Those elements I was just free to kind of float, whereas the red guitar was a show that I'd written. I can still get up and do an hour of storytelling, playing, and comedy, which is kind of where I see myself going as the things open up. But one thing I really want to impress upon guitar players, if I can go into a little bit of a teaching space here,
Sure.
is it's something that's so natural to piano players, which is like, there's really three basic elements happening. There's the melody, there's the harmony, and there's the bass. And because of the way we're trained to kind of grab the root, generally with our index finger, and play, we don't oftentimes hear those three things as separate entities that interact. And I think for solo guitar playing, that is, if you want to play what we call kind of jazz or tunes at a little bit of a beyond arrangement level, improvisation, you need to kind of embrace that. You need to be able to play without the bass. You need to be able to play without the chords. You need to be able to play without you never will play without the melody, because the voice leading inside the harmony and the bass is going to be melodic anyways. But in terms of having a true melodic line driving everything, you don't need that either. So like everybody getting comfortable with all those aspects, almost, because like when you put your hand on a piano, it's like, it's obvious, right? This part of your left hand's the bass. This part of the middle of it's, kind of the chordal stuff, and the lines happen on the right hand, on the edge of it, and it's just like the music just lays out for you.
Right.
And, sometimes we don't, as guitar players, get that. And it holds us back. And then you're like, there's guys really great. I mean, these are people I admire, I paid money to go hear all the time, like Tommy Emmanuel and Tuck Andrus, the one-man band players,
right?
Who really do everything all the time. Chet Atkins,
Right.
The post-Chet world. That's amazing and it's brilliant. But to me, it's like, it's a lot of work, and it doesn't really embrace that thing that like I hear with Art Tatum, or the Duke Ellington band or the Count Basie band, where it's a juxtaposition of things. It's not necessarily a barrage of things.
Right. Yep.
And Joe Pass and I used to hang out with him, and I'd play solo for him, and he goes, "Why don't you play more bass, more bass, more bass?" And he was like, "You're leaving all this bass out," because that's the way he played, and I think his father kind of made him play that way. And I said, "Joe, I don't want to do that. I don't like that." And at first I think he kind of like almost was insulted, but then I'd sit and I'd play it, and I'd kind of be doing the walking bass, and I'd be, and it's, to me, it just feels like I'm just trying to work, the music, I can hear the root motion for a while. And if I leave it out, then when I go back to it, I like the bigness that it gives the music. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, if I can't hear what key I'm in, I'm going to start playing a lot of roots.
Right.
But once we can hear the harmony, we don't need the root motion. You can have, listen to symphonic music. There's oftentimes just the cellos in there playing inner voicings, and the bass are laying out.
Right. Yeah, that's
and
true.
It's beautiful. You're never like going, well, what song are they playing?
Right. The bass players in an orchestra, I'm sure, have plenty of rests.
Yeah. And lots of balloons.
Yeah.
Those big, whole notes,
Yeah.
And So, and I mean, I'm not making a criticism. I'm just saying the way I want to play.
Right.
It's just like, I just don't hear that, I just,
Hmm.
and because of like the work you do one place, you're sacrificing the work you're doing somewhere else. I mean, that's just sorry, those are the laws of nature.
Right.
you know
Right. Right. Wow. Well, that's fantastic. Fantastic way of thinking about it. Um, uh, uh, wow, you left me. I don't have a follow up for that. That was just really eloquent and really
Well,
beautiful.
I mean, it's just a way of, I mean, definitely if I sound, if I'm sounding so arrogant, it's like that I've got it down. Believe me, I don't. It's a work in progress. But the beauty of it is it's endless. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, when I play a song, I may have a couple of little moves I like during the head, but after that, you're just hearing whatever happens to come to my mind.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I mean, and believe me, a lot more comes to my mind than I can do. So, you know,
There was a tune when I saw you, um, and I can't remember which tune it was, but when I saw you do the Red Guitar Show in Long Beach a couple years ago, there was a tune in F in your set, and you introduced it with Jimmy Wyble's Etude One, which is like also
yeah,
an F.
yeah.
And I wonder if his conception did you spend time with Jimmy? Did you study his conception, or was that just like that etude and
Oh, well, I know. Jimmy had a huge effect on me.
hmm,
I knew Jimmy's playing. We were friends for years,
hmm.
just like friends, mostly through Dave Kuntz, Larry's father,
Oh yeah.
and who I was good friends with. And um, when I moved to LA, and I had the band Cowbop.
Hmm.
I have this Western swing band, Western swing bebop hybrid show band called Cowbop,
Yeah.
and and Jimmy, of course, had that extensive history with Bob Wills and Spade Cooley and Hank Penny's band.
Sure.
So I mean that iconic solo on Roly Poly is Jimmy.
Hmm.
That da 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 da. That's all Jimmy.
Oh wow.
And so I just kind of wanted to hang out with him, and get him to know Cowbop. And actually, he did come and hang out and sit in with us.
Oh wow.
And so, and I remember we were just sitting there, and Jimmy's like, blown away by my playing. Jimmy, how just unbelievably complimentary and nice he is.
Yes. Yes.
And he was, I play for him, and I play some jazz. He just loved. Oh, I can't believe how, And then he just like picked up his guitar and started playing, and it just literally fucked my head up. It just like I went like, holy shit.
Yeah.
What is happening here? I don't believe this. You know
Right.
what I mean? And moreover, I don't believe that he could even begin to enjoy my playing after I just heard that. So in my way, I just like started immediately deducing how he was conceiving it,
Hmm.
how it was working in his head. You know what I mean? Rather than trying to copy a lick that he played. It's
Right.
like, do you mind if I play my guitar a little bit?
No, so that'd be great.
Like the first thing I noticed here, I'm going to go back to Lobster Cam so you can see it.
Okay.
Um, so like first thing I noticed is like, whereas I would play that chord, he would play more like
Huh.
he would break the notes out. That's the first thing I noticed. Okay, like we do this, Jimmy does this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Be like Jimmy. You know what I mean? You can always strum the chord. This is
Right.
like he just in that 1 second, like all of my vocabulary was like doubled,
Right.
or maybe to the second power, really. Right there.
Right.
Then of course, like his choice of picking out the leading tones, which we would just go, he'd go,
Yes.
things like that. or like, and I'm not so sure that he ever played that exact thing, but
Right.
that's what it sounded like to me. And I had to get into that,
Wow.
and then I was always really big on like counterpoint in terms of descending and ascending bass motion. That's something I was already deep into that. But then hearing how he was using inner motion and how he would oftentimes just plant a note, like I have a turnaround like that, and he'd go. And I'm still in that B flat up there, right?
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it almost sounded like Bach. Right.
That's what I was thinking, that just as you were playing that.
And it's like I'm going like, I know all this stuff. I'm already comping these sounds.
Right.
I'm just not separating them and featuring them music.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, Jimmy did what Jimmy did to like an ridiculous degree, but right away I'm like, there are these like switches being flipped in my brain about like, I've got this information, I'm not using it to the fullest ability.
Right.
And of course, I think when I left, Jimmy gave me that book, the classic country, remember classical country book?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna grab it, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, not that one. I mean, this one. For the people that are just listening, we're holding up the same book.
Yeah, that's really funny.
And it's both within arm reaches of both of us. You see, So I got that book and I learned the first etude, figuring, it would unlock a whole lot of stuff. And it did. I've learned a couple of them, I mean, it's funny, like the few things that I have transcribed in my life, that's one of them. Actually, there's a lot of them, but it's almost like when I play them, I'm like dusting off old family picture. It's a cherished memento in my life, like looking at grandma, I mean, playing Jimmy's etude is sort of like that, feels like that to me.
Sure.
When I play it, I think of him. I think of my gratitude and my love and all the warmth, that they showed me.
Yeah.
So like, those are the things that I kind of got into with Jimmy, and got more into like, but, into counterpoint more. I mean, just challenging myself to use counterpoint and use moving voices even more than I had. I mean, a lot of it came from Bobby Timmons. If you ever looked at him, the piano player, he'd play like a chord, there'd always, when he slap a chord down, there's always something that's going to move real fast in it. Usually the fifth to the sixth, but sometimes like, if it was in the case of a 2/5, you'll hear you'll hear hear that in there a lot. I mean, it's real churchy sounding. So I of course had to like figure out where all that is on the guitar and get it easy to play, that kind of thing, where we would normally just go.
Right.
Now it's so yeah, that's kind of I mean, it was seismic. The effect, I mean, it was that one night too. It was one experience that led to, of course, a long friendship, and I hung out with him and he shared stuff with me, and then I would, he'd give me something to play and I'd play it, and then I'd say, well, yeah, you could do that, but you could also do this, right? And I'd like play a variation on that. And he would make me show it. So what is that? What did you just do? I says, well, it's the same thing you did, but it just this. I mean, he wanted to learn it,
Right.
And I think he learned things differently than I did. I just kind of make them up. I think he kind of was very meticulous in how he had to understand it, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
he was far more methodical, I guess, and I'm far more impulsive. So, but you know, I mean, we'd spend these hours together. Just, you know, I'd say like, you know, that thing the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, that's all
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, harmonically. So, like, of course, I was coming up with all these variations on it, you know, by like changing a couple of the chords. Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 6, I went 1, 4, 3, 6, or I
Huh.
went flat 5, 4, 3, you know,
Right.
and by just having those colors to play with and still kind of playing the same way, I could get this other shit going, which just makes total sense to me. But it, you know, to him, it was like everything was kind of on lockdown once he got it down, you know.
Right. Right.
And it was, yeah, but just, you know, there are people, obviously, that guy, you know, right there, number one, who change the way you hear.
Hmm.
That's the only way it's the only way I can describe it. And those people are gifts. The like, is to a musician, that's like the biggest gift of your life, is those people who you love and who move you so much that they literally change the way you hear. And in that one thing, it creates a life, you know, of direction.
Wow.
And Jimmy was one of those people for me. And I was lucky because I was kind of older by then.
Okay.
You know, I was probably, I don't know, 50.
Okay.
You know, I mean, like I said, I'd known him. He'd come to a lot of my gigs, you know, I mean, and what a sweet man, you know. And but finally moved to LA, I don't know, 2000. Yeah, I would have been 50 years old.
Right.
And but bang, it happens at 50 just like it happens at 14, you know.
Well, that right there is just a thrilling notion to think that something could hit you that after that many years of playing music, that someone could hit you and just change the way that you hear music.
Yeah.
That's thrilling.
Yeah, I mean, it truly was, and I'll be forever grateful. I mean, a lot of it was kind of, and it's funny how that is when it happens to you. Almost your first reaction is like almost, duh, what a dummy I am. Why didn't I think of this? You know what I mean? There's like almost that in there, but of course, you know, and wishing you'd heard it earlier. But you know, ultimately, timing is perfect. You hear things when you need to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.